Hello, BookTube. We're continuing with my 2023 library tour. I'm going book by book in my whole collection to give myself a visual record of where I stand at the beginning of the year. Always a fun thing to do. I sometimes look back at I think I've done 2 full-scale library tours since I've had this channel, and it's amazing to see how my collection has changed and what things have stayed the same. So we're going to continue on, and I'm going to be reaching up out of the frame just a bit, but that's preferable to being on a step stool for another video. And I hope you're in the mood for penguins, because we've got a lot of penguins to look at. So we'll start with the penguin of all penguins, the Bible. Penguin at long last came out with their own version of the King James Bible, heavily annotated with introductions and endnotes and everything. Just a beautiful, beautiful edition. I so enthused about this book when it came out. It came out when I was working in a bookstore, and I was the only one in the building who was doing handsprings about it. I was the only one in the building who knew why it was special. Penguin's never done this before. I was delighted, and I remain so. It's one of my favorite Bibles. And then we've got one more Transwise books. Then we'll deal with the shelf of books. And the other Transwise books is the M.A. Screech translation of the complete essays of Montaigne. Huge brick of a thing. All of Montaigne's essays in what is the definitive edition. I mean, you've got Florio, but that's outdated language. Screech's, this is a monumental work, and it really does, reading through it, I mean, Montaigne has never really done it for me. I'm not a super fan the way he has a handful of super fans, but reading through this really knocks the dust off the older translations and shows you why this guy is so fascinating. He is so immediate. He is so immediate in his presence on the page. I swear, there are dozens and dozens of essays in that big volume where you completely forget that the narrator of the essay, the person that you're mentally talking to, has been dead for centuries. You completely forget that. And those are the two Transwise books. Now we'll move on to just a shelf of books. The first one being Troilus and Cresside by Geoffrey Chaucer. Penguin does a whole bunch of Chaucer. This is translated by Neville Coghill, who I think will probably come up again on this shelf. Neville Coghill is famous for doing Penguin's Canterbury Tales, and translated here means updated in its English. It doesn't take more than, at most, 2 concerted weeks of effort on your part to read Chaucer without any updating, without any Neville Coghills or anybody else, no Peter Ackroyds, nobody else in the picture, just you and Chaucer. And you benefit a lot from doing that, because Chaucer was really fond of wordplay. He was, for a bit of a court oaf, he was extremely astute and very erudite, so reading him without an intermediary means a lot. It changes the reading experience. However, that having been said, Coghill does a great job of making a great reading experience. He was effectively, for an entire generation of English language readers, he was Chaucer. The voice that he chose to adopt for the Chaucer in Chaucer's own works is the Chaucer that a whole generation of readers know. And it's not a bad version of Chaucer, it's accurate. And this, of course, like all Penguins, has great supporting material. So, not a bad volume to have. I'm not saying that Neville Coghill desecrates what he clearly loves. Okay, then we have, this is Kieran Carson's translation of the Time. This is a great Irish epic that Penguin does in a very lovely paperback. This is, it's an ancient Irish epic, but boy, oh boy, when you're talking about ancient epics, some of them read different than others, right? I mean, the Aeneid is an ancient epic as well. It's probably just about as old as the oral roots of this epic, but it doesn't read it doesn't read at all like this. Now that's partially the result of having one author as opposed to multiple authors. If you are the Aeneid and you have only one author, and your author happens to be a wind-defying bore, well, then you're up against it. But this is a story of high enchantment, fantastic signature battle scenes, great character development. Just it reads very much alive. It reads like an ancestor of great epic fantasy. Okay, then we have, this is an older Penguin volume. This is translations by Simon Keynes and Michael Lapidge. I have no idea who they are, but I love this volume. I had this in mass market forever and ever. This is Alfred the Great, a Penguin volume simply called Alfred the Great, that consists of a fairly indispensable life of Alfred and a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. Lots and lots of people wrote about Alfred in his lifetime and shortly after, especially after his life, when mythology started to accrue and when it was pretty obvious that that mythology was only going to grow, that it wasn't going to go away. And this Penguin volume does what a lot of really great Penguin volumes do. We're going to see a lot of them. It doesn't just dutifully go in, translate one ancient work, slap on an introduction, and then leave. Instead, it gives you a kind of an omnium gatherum, kind of a big banquet of stuff related to the subject. Very, very valuable when they do that. Then we have, this is Einhard and Noctur the Stammerer. These are two different biographies of Charlemagne. So we go from Alfred the Great to Charles the Great. And these are two contemporary lives of Charlemagne that tell us a lot. There have been new, big scholarly biographies of Charlemagne. There was one just a few years ago that I quite liked, but they all are built on these two pieces. They're all built on this. Not taking them as gospel, but these were people who were alive at the time and who knew that they were chronicling an historic figure. So, and it makes also for great reading. Einhard and Noctur the Stammerer make for great reading. One of the two is significantly more interesting writer than the other. Oh my, okay, now we have, some of you will be familiar with this from Tom at Tom L.A. Books. This is Ludovico Ariosto. This is Orlando Furioso. This is part 2. Somewhere I must have part 1 as well. I have these in mass market paperbacks. Penguin, bless their heart, brought these out. They did a 2-volume translation of Ariosto's immense Renaissance epic, the Orlando Furioso. It's such a long poem that they split it into 2 very fat volumes. And they brought out 2 trade paperbacks that are a hell of a lot easier on the eyes for reading than the mass market paperbacks. The mass market paperbacks are going to turn out, but I'm hoping that volume 1 of this also turns out. I grab them whenever I see them because A, I figure it's not hoarding because nobody else wants them, and B, you never know when you're going to see a really nice set. I would like this in trade in a really nice set. And this is much like any ancient Irish epic. This is a hard sell for a great thing. If the instinct of most readers is going to be to hear what this is. An absolutely gigantic Italian Renaissance epic about knights and ladies and Christians versus Muslims. And is going to think, I'll pass, thanks. I'll wait for the next bus. And they're doing themselves a disservice when they do that, because this is utterly wonderful. It's an utterly wonderful, exciting, funny, captivating, moving epic. I mentioned sometimes epics suffer by having only one author. Well, in this case, not. Now, Tom at Tom L.A. Books is doing a slow walk through the Orlando Furioso, and I strongly recommend those videos. They are wonderful. I also recommend giving it a try. There are plenty of ancient Italian Renaissance works that Penguin did not bring out in an edition. Whereas this, they not only did it, but they did it in style. It is nice to see. I'm not sure that Penguin's Orlando Furioso exists anymore. I don't know that they print it anymore. But they did. There are copies that are available. Oh, okay. All right. Then we have a volume, really nice volume, Selected Essays of Samuel Johnson. So this is a lot of, this will have excerpts from the lives of the poets, I'm sure, off the top of my head remembering. So the Rambro, the Adventurer, the Isler, miscellaneous essays. Oh no, this might not, this doesn't look like it has anything from the lives of the poets, probably because Penguin probably makes a volume of the lives of the poets, separate from this. I know Oxford does. But this, the periodical essays that Johnson was writing on deadline for money are often just filled with brilliance, in a way that is a little bit blunted when he was given signorial leisure to write a piece. Sometimes those pieces chase their own tails. Whereas when he's on a deadline and he's got an audience and there's, 10 shillings on the table, that can make a difference. It definitely gives you a different Johnson than his slower, more considered stuff. Okay, then a nice Penguin volume of the selected poems of John Dryden. Tons and tons of stuff in it, because as you can sometimes tell from how much stuff is in my books, how often I revisit those particular books as opposed to the books on either side. And Dryden is one of my favorite poets. I absolutely love him. I am, as far as I know, the only person left in the world who counts Dryden as one of his favorite poems, one of his favorite poets. And this is, as always with Penguin, this is a great selection. You could do worse than to use this as your go-to Dryden volume. Oh my. Okay. All right. Great. This is a little schmutz on it here. Let's clean this up. Don't want you to see her. This is the Rosary Edmonds translation of Anna Karenina with this great, great cover. Just a perfect cover. Who is that? Portrait of an Unknown Woman by I. Kramskoy, which is in a gallery in Moscow, but will forever for me be Anna. It's just every once in a while, Penguin. I'm not always the biggest fan of their old cover choices, but every once in a while they hit one right out of the park, and in this they did. She is synonymous for me with Anna. And this, the Rosemary Edmonds is my favorite Tolstoy translator. I have a couple of other Anna Karenins. This is Anna Karenin instead of Anna Karenina. They're variations on the same thing. If you're Mrs. Karenin, then you don't necessarily need to take the A at the end. But I have other versions of this by other translators, but this is the one I go back to. Okay, then we have Roman history, Cassius Dio. This is a slice of Cassius Dio. No one, as far as I know, no popular publisher has done the whole. Unfortunately, he's a fairly good writer. When he gets the bit in his teeth and stops lecturing, he can be very dramatic, very good. This is just the bit on the reign of the Emperor Augustus. And like a couple of other things that we've mentioned, it is indispensable. You absolutely can't do without this if you're writing about Augustus. And not necessarily because of Cassius Dio himself, but because Cassius Dio had access to sources that we don't have anymore. He could stroll down the street to a library or a library branch and see books that we would give our eye teeth to have. And you're pulling out your hair when you're reading books like this, accounts like this, or other accounts of other figures. You're pulling out your hair saying, your rhetorical periods are very well designed, but I would give anything if you would just sit and transcribe the sources that you're seeing and just give us the whole of it so that we can study that. He's still entertaining on his own. Okay, then we have another Russian. Who is this? This is the David Macduff translation of The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. A huge thing there that has a new translation coming out this year. Michael Katz is doing a new translation of Brothers Karamazov. Always interesting. I think that new translation of The Brothers Karamazov will probably be the most canonical work that gets a new translation in 2023. There'll be others. There'll be lots and lots of others, but I think that's the biggest ticket. And so I'll be using this. I'll be going back to this and I have two other English language translations when it comes time to assess that. Then we have a little-known book called Dracula. The classic cover there, or the seductress, no doubt meant to signify either Dracula's wives or poor dear Lucy. But either way, another canny choice on Penguin's part. There's a later Penguin classic of Dracula that looks cartoonishly ugly. But this is not only eye-catching, right? It's a black and white illustration, but it's still eye-catching. But it also speaks to the text, which you really want a cover illustration to do. It speaks to the text in reminding a modern-day reader, especially a first-time reader of Bram Stoker, that Dracula is very much a novel about seduction. This is not out of place at all. It's not out of place that Dracula himself is not on this cover. I, of course, love Dracula. So, all right. Here we have one with a pub sheet in it and everything. This is the Penguin Book of Haiku, ranging over centuries. Just a delightful, delightful anthology, ranging over centuries, all kinds of different attitudes and approaches to haiku. You would think, maybe reflexively, if you don't know much about it, or especially if you've never tried your hand at it, you might think that it's pretty inflexible. I mean, the number of syllables per line is counted and you can't change it. That seems very strictured, but there's all the world of variation in them, all the world. And this book shows that. It's a Penguin poetry anthology that I really like. Some of their poetry anthologies I'm not wild about, but okay, here's another poetry anthology. This is an older one. This is a classic poetry anthology. This is the Peter Macmillan translation of 100 Poets, One Poem Each. Japanese poetry here. I'm not 100% sure about the cover of this one, but the anthology itself is amazing. And also in this volume, the textual apparatus telling you about this anthology is amazing. Just amazingly good. Okay, then we have A Lost Cause. Our next one is Lost Cause. This is Selected Writings of John Ruskin. You're probably going to not know who that is. He was a gigantic, towering literary figure in the Victorian era. He's completely forgotten now. And I would argue that not only is he forgotten, but that the 21st century has probably lost a lot of the ability to read him. Not the physical ability to find him on Project Gutenberg and read something, but the ability to get what they're reading. Boy, oh boy, did people get him in his day. Everyone got him. He was known, quoted, loved, debated, on the stature of a public intellectual, the like of which we do not really have today. And I think that his prose is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I would love it if Penguin did a big, fat volume recension of his book about his enormous ongoing work about Venice with illustrations. It would be a pricey Penguin, but I would love that. There is no, currently, as far as I know, there is no readily accessible version of that, of his gigantic, sprawling work on the man-made geography of Venice as he found it. Once upon a time, 30 years ago, a publisher, I forget who, did bring out gigantic hardcover volumes of all of that. We got them in my bookstore. And I was called to the receiving room. Somebody in the receiving room unpacked volume 1 of Ruskin on Venice and saw what it was and just called me. So Steve's going to want to look at this. I went back and saw it. I was overjoyed to see it, but I was also just despairing because I knew that it wasn't going to sell. That the whole set eventually came in and it just sat there. It was way outside my budget as a bookseller. It was way outside what I could pay. And I knew that no one else would. I talked it up to a handful of customers that I thought might be likely bets, but it was just too much. And it's gone. That set is probably collectible now. And this will have, this book has bits and pieces, I'm sure, from, well, poetic description, art, nature, self-portrait. Okay, well, there's an art and architecture section here that have lots of little bits and pieces. There's lots of little bits and pieces here, and Ruskin didn't write in little bits and pieces, so it's an anthology. I'm glad to see it, but I could stand I would like a Penguin anthology of Ruskin that was this big. That would be really nice if that were true. We could do that. But apart from doing that, they're probably just going to drop Ruskin completely if they haven't already. Okay, all right. This is Chaucer again. This is the Canterbury Tales. Big, fat Canterbury Tales, edited by Jill Mann. And you'll notice no translator is listed here because this version does not have a translator. This version claims not to need a translator instead. This is just Chaucer. So you have to grapple a little with the English that you're seeing on the page. You have to grapple a little. And let me see if I can show you. Jill Mann heavily annotates, so you're not alone while you're grappling with Chaucer. This is a lovely volume. Amazing to see a big, fat Penguin volume of Chaucer without any intermediaries at all, especially considering that Penguin kept the lights on and the electricity going with Neville Coghill's English version of the Canterbury Tales. It did very, very well for them. Better than most Penguin classics do. But they brought this out anyway, and no competition. They're both worthy books. Okay, here's another bookstore story. This is the Shahnameh of Ferdowsi in an English translation, amazingly, an English translation by Dick Davis. And I was overjoyed when this came out. I think this came out as a big, fat Viking hardcover before it was adopted into the Penguin line. I'm pretty sure that it was Viking. And again, we got it at the bookstore. We got 2 copies of that big, fat hardcover, and I was overjoyed at a brand new, fresh, non-creaky, non-dusty translation of this great, great book. I was overjoyed to see that. I was roundly mocked for it. My colleagues roundly mocked me for it. And then a little bit later, it came out as a Penguin Classic. How wonderful. How absolutely wonderful. Okay, and then the last one on this shelf is, we go back to Japan. This is a Japanese classic. This is the Royal Tyler translation of the book, The Tale of the Heike, a kind of big warfare epic of Japanese literature. Very much the counterpoint to The Tale of Genji. This is about armies at war and brutality and savage Game of Thrones type maneuverings and horrible savage people. It's absolutely wonderful. I was overjoyed when I learned, Royal Tyler, of course, is famous for his translation of Tale of Genji. I was overjoyed when I learned that he was going to do this book. And once again, it came out as a hardcover and from, I think, Viking again. And I knew that there was a small but rarefied conversation going on about it in critical circles. That conversation where new books are talked about by various critics. I love that conversation. I like to be part of it. And at first I thought I wouldn't be able to, and then I managed to talk an editor into letting me review this for a very large readership overseas. And that was a delight. It was a delight to be able to do that. I don't think I'm blurbed here. The TLS and the New York Times Book Review are blurbed on this. Oh wait, there are more blurbs. I'm not going to be blurbed though. New York Times, LA Times, Publishers Weekly, a starred review. Yeah, not many, a page, because this is an ask. This is a large imposition on the reader. In part because it doesn't have much of the weird charm of Genji. Genji can be a horrifying book. Definitely, it is a horrifying book, but it does have a weird kind of charm. And the Heike does not usually have that. And the bits and pieces that have it, it's a very blood-soaked kind of charm. So it's a harder sell for readers. And as a result, I was assuming that the critical conversation would be smaller than it is every time there's a new Genji. And it was, but I still managed to get a toehold in it. And there you go. That is the first shelf. And this wasn't bad. I was reaching up, but you were still able to keep your eyes on the prize. So this wasn't bad. Good, because I'd rather not deal with a step stool if I can. So I'll wrap this up, and we will continue tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.